Welcome to episode 205 of the Formula One Grid Talk podcast. Today, the team will be here to preview all the talking points ahead of this weekend's Canadian Grand Prix. Hosting today will be myself, Philip Mathew of the Grip Strip podcast, and joining me today will be Mikael Kataja, Formula One rider. Adam Burns of the DNF1 podcast.
Hi, everyone.
And Kark King of the Monkey Seat podcast.
Hello.
So we're coming off of the Azerbaijan Grand Prix yesterday, which saw Max Verstappen win yet again and tie a couple of legends with 25 Formula One wins in the process. Increase his points lead over his teammate Sergio Perez in the point standings at the expense of the Ferrari team and their customers, since 5 of the 6 Ferrari powered cars in the race yesterday had issues of some sort, including pole sitter Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz. So leading into this weekend's Canadian Grand Prix, the momentum is all in the favor of Red Bull, in the hands of Max Verstappen trying to get another world championship. It was a good day for his girlfriend's family, since of course he won, and her sister's driver Daniel Suarez also won his first career Cup Series race at Sonoma, California in the NASCAR Cup Series. So great day for the PKs, and they didn't have to run over anybody or wreck anybody to do it. So it was actually pretty convenient for them. Mikael, we'll go with you first. In regards to Max Verstappen this weekend, it's the first time in a few years since we've been at Montreal, of course, and it's been 3 years, and it's not a track that Max has won at yet, but all signs based on the car and based on how Max is doing speaks to the high possibility that we may be watching him win again this coming weekend. It may not happen in qualifying, but it'll probably happen in the race.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking back at how he's fared in Montreal, in 2019 and 2018, and he hasn't really. I mean, he's had good results, fifth and a third, so being the better Red Bull driver both times, but. Yeah, I wonder if it is as strong of a track for Red Bull as we're expecting now coming from Azerbaijan. I don't know. I think he'll definitely still struggle to get a pole there. I would have my money on Charles for that more likely. I think he should. I would expect him to be maybe second, maybe third, depending on Perez. But overall, yeah, I'm not maybe expecting him to be the favorite at least. But I mean, of course, as we see this weekend, you never know what's going to happen. So as long as he maybe gets a little bit of an upper hand on Perez, I think he'll be well positioned to at least get solid points. And then I assume that when Ferrari eventually breaks down again, then he'll probably reap the benefit and win the race. So I don't think he's a clear favorite, but he'll be definitely second place, most likely.
Yeah, it's something where he's never really been in a position per se to compete, because it has been Mercedes' emphasis for the past however many years since the turbo hybrid era started. And it's a track where one particular driver has done very, very well in his career there, which we'll get into in a little bit. But you mentioned him, Mikael, in regards to Sergio Perez, and Sergio right now is second in points. He has put himself right in the conversation to possibly go and compete for a world championship. To be honest, we already know what the discussion or how that'll all work out. Winning Monaco was a huge win, his biggest win of his career. For Sergio Perez. But when you get into things, he is very consistent, and he has put himself right in the mix. He's only 21 points behind his teammate. Only one DNF this year. and multiple podiums. Was it 4 podium finishes? No finishes outside of 4th in regular races. And so, in that sense, Adam, when we get into Sergio Perez, he's in the mix all the time, not just in the race, but where everybody knows his tire preservation is probably the best on the grid. But he has gotten around this qualifying to where he's doing better at times than Max Verstappen. And so it gives him an opportunity here in this spot at Montreal, a racetrack where they haven't been in 3 years, will be rough, relative similar to what they had this past weekend at Azerbaijan. And who knows, maybe Sergio Perez could go out there and follow his compatriot Daniel Suarez and get a victory this weekend at Montreal.
Yeah, it's quite interesting with Checo because, you know, he is starting to become what Red Bull really needed in a number 2 driver. He's picking up results. He's getting the odd win. Most importantly, when his teammate Max Verstappen isn't able to get the victory, he's able to pick up the spoils and, more importantly, take points off his rivals. I think a lot of people would have been a little bit disappointed, particularly that radio call in Azerbaijan when Max had that overtake on Checo where they said no fighting. But I think the way the race was playing out, it seemed that Max was able to manage his pace and his tyres a lot better in that opening stint than Checo was. He looked like he was scampering away, and then he started to come back towards Leclerc and Verstappen before the pit stops came into force, that early virtual safety car. And it just felt, as Checo said, that Max was a lot stronger than him on the day. And I agree. I think even without the team orders, I think Max would have got the better of Checo at some point during that race anyway. So I totally understand that. Overall, it was more surprising to me the way that Checo managed that first stint, though, because this is a guy that we often associate as being brilliant out of the traction zones. He handles slow 90-degree corners as good as anybody in F1 right now, and he's great on tyre management. But we saw the opposite of that. Granted, we didn't know how the race was going to play out because Red Bull had the race in the bag once Ferrari suffered their reliability trouble. So going into Montreal, with Checo in the position that he's in the championship, with a new contract underneath and a longer term contract as well, when he's operating brilliantly with this new car, particularly in qualifying, he does seem to have a slight edge on his teammate over 1 lap pace. It will be interesting to see if this dynamic changes a little bit. I'll be honest with you. I said in Azerbaijan, I didn't think the status quo would change. I think Max Verstappen is certainly going to get the backing of his team for this World Championship, and Checo is going to play the supporting role. I don't expect that to change this weekend. What I will say, though, is depending on what happens with Ferrari, it could be the difference between Perez having a chance at winning and not. We can't really predict that at the moment because of how unstable those Ferraris are in reliability. As quick as they are and on pace, I would say they might consider themselves favourites this weekend, but we can't really judge them in that regard, unfortunately. So I'm expecting another strong weekend from Checo, easily top 4 on merit, possibly another podium, and you never know. The race might pan out for him and he may win again.
I mean, it's going to be, we've seen it so far this year, a quarter way through the season. It's been 4 drivers plus a certain other guy for another team that seems to sneak on the podium once in a while. Fundamentally, we know who's going to be in the mix generally week to week, even with the developments or some of the developments that have come along. But Red Bull is in their own zone right now. It has feels and momentum similar to Vettel's great times from 2009 through 13. You just changed the character and it's Max Verstappen essentially. But the difference there, you brought up favor who's going to be favored and not, Adam. The fact is there isn't the same aggro that there was between Vettel and Mark Webber. There definitely isn't that same dynamic as it is here with Max Verstappen and Checo Perez. Checo Perez definitely understands his role, but he's served dutifully and has become a very strong competitor to the point where it could be similar to the years of Lewis and, say, Rosberg, Lewis, and even Valtteri at times, where they would dominate the world championship. But switching to those Ferraris that both of you have mentioned, Carl, Charles Leclerc qualified on pole again, had great pace, had all the energy, went and was in position, at least initially, to possibly go and have a chance. But the start didn't go well for him yesterday, and it kind of just unraveled from there for him and his team. Yet another DNF, coming off of some of the recent races, of course, talking about Monaco, and where they threw away a likely win. Ferrari is on the back foot at the moment. They may have the best one-lap pace amongst all the teams right now, but Charles Leclerc's confidence is going to start going down, and with his confidence goes the Scuderia, honestly, based on the lack of consistency his teammate has provided. What are you looking for at Sergio Villeneuve for the lead driver?
I mean, Mr. Leclerc, he finished third last time out on our last outing to Canada back in 2019 now. And so, he likes that track in the Ferrari. Obviously, this was pre getting told off days. And yeah, so, I mean, Leclerc, I mean, you're right. They are Mr. Saturdays, the Ferraris, the two of them almost. There's nothing that they can't really do. They'll lap, and it's a street circuit, so they're going to be pushing out the Mercedes, which aren't going to be in there. They're not going to touch them. And they should basically be 1 and 3 or 1 and 4. I don't think Sainz will get up there. So Leclerc is just grand. He is getting hampered by the Ferraris, by the Ferrari Scuderia, and they're not going to gain anything really. I think this could be another pole and not win again. Keep the record going. I just don't think they have the start off the line either. The power of the line compared to the Red Bulls, and second and third. And if those Red Bulls are together, they're vicious.
And that's the issue that Ferrari has at the moment. Initially, at the start of the season, Ferrari had shown an ability amongst their duo to go and stand up to the Red Bulls, at least for the first couple of Grand Prix of the season. But since the Saudi Grand Prix, it's kind of gone away. And along with that, even with the problems that Max Verstappen had early in the season with reliability, Ferrari's, not only their pace, but their, of course, strategy, which is well known, has came into question and has left, along with their reliability, has left Ferrari on the back foot, firmly second in the Constructors' Championship. But Mikael, in regards to his teammate Carlos Sainz, back in his overall the years he's been in Formula One, been in different cars, nothing of great significance to be up in the top 5 per se. But is this an opportunity for him, after scuffling a bit, of course, not being able to really race yesterday, going out very early at a track, hasn't been there in a few years, to go and maybe reestablish himself as somewhat of a factor in this, not for the championship, but maybe for second in the driver's standings come year's end?
I mean, I would like to believe that. I as I was already talking in reference to Max, I think Ferraris are going to Canada as the favorites for getting any reliability issues. And I would like to see Sainz kind of push up to the level of Leclerc, because the beginning of the season has been so, I wouldn't even necessarily say mediocre, because not only has he had a lot of the reliability issues, but he's also had, some serious mistakes in both qualies and races. I mean, sometimes unlucky and sometimes purely on his own fault. So I would love to see him get some success. He's still hunting that first win with Ferrari as well. Well, first win for his career, I think, as well. So if there are no reliability issues, and I'm hoping that his confidence is, still up there, I would expect him to be very closely tailing with Leclerc on the second. So maybe if something happens, or let's say Ferrari is a bit more conservative with the pit strategy with Leclerc, trying to, battle with Verstappen, and then maybe they let Sainz go on a long one stop or however. I think without the car breaking down, I think and I hope that Carlos will be in contention for the win, but we'll see. He really needs to turn his trajectory for this season.
Yeah, I mean, I bring it up in regards to points. I brought him up because it was Ferrari. We were on the Ferrari discussion. But he's actually fifth in points after his second DNF of the season yesterday at Azerbaijan. It's been a struggle, third DNF. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, it's just not been, considering what the initial pace was this year, and at times looking like he could qualify in pole, and generally in qualifying, setting that benchmark time in Q3 and giving Charles Leclerc something to aim at, or Max Verstappen, and they've usually answered on the second run relative to Carlos Sainz for whatever reason. His pace and his performance has kind of gotten away from what got Carlos Sainz into the Ferrari in the first place, which is a shame. But I think it also comes with the pressure of being in a really good car when it runs. Speaking of a car that runs, albeit very roughly, is the Mercedes and a certain George Russell, who got yet another podium. There used to be a thing here on the show where our great host George would go and say that George Russell will score points. And it used to be a thing for a long time. And then he started scoring points, and then he started he got a podium last year, and now he's in a Mercedes. And I think a lot of us were hoping it would be a little bit further up and they'd actually have a chance. But as it stands, they're the third best team in Formula One at the moment, and George Russell is outperforming his world championship winning teammate, multiple podiums at him, and another solid performance relative to what the car is providing them. But I think it really speaks to what George has had to deal with over time in regards to quality of equipment, minus the obvious back issues and chiropractic visits and other doctors that he's going to have to see after this season because of all the damage that's being done to him. What are your thoughts on George Russell for this weekend at Montreal, and for Mercedes as we lead into a certain other guy who's been known to win there a lot?
Yeah, I mean, George Russell, for lack of a better way of putting it, is doing a sensational job, considering that what he's got on him in terms of a car. And his consistency this season has been absolutely incredible. I think a lot of us were already preparing caveats in, the form of it was going to be his first season in Mercedes. Of course, there was a lot of hype and potential for him. Some going as far as saying that he was the heir apparent to the throne that Sir Lewis Hamilton currently occupies in Mercedes, and also F1 by extension. But, despite all of that, George has excelled so far this season. As you said, he's not finished outside the top 5 in any Grand Prix this season. He's the only driver to have achieved that this season. It was his third podium in Baku. And the one amazing thing about what George Russell is doing this season is he's limiting the damage that Mercedes are suffering as a result of the issues that they have with the car, the obvious gulf in performance between themselves and the Ferraris and Red Bulls, who right now, reliability aside, are in a completely different league on performance to anybody else in the field. So despite all the issues that are going on at Mercedes, George Russell is maximizing the absolute most that he can and picking up the pieces. And for lack of a better way of putting it, he's doing a fantastic job. This weekend, obviously, he's only raced there once before in F1. And this, as I said, back in 2019, he was in a completely different car back then, a completely different set of circumstances. So the expectation is going up and up and up with every race with George Russell. But right now, we're seeing a guy that's got bags of talent. a very mature head, considering he has very young shoulders, although his back might be feeling a little bit older than it should, owing to the porpoising of that Mercedes right now. But no matter what's being thrown at him, he is absolutely delivering and doing a great job. So I see no reason why that can't continue. The only issue, which is obviously quite obvious right now, is the issue of porpoising with Mercedes. And obviously there's been a lot of talk about, following this weekend's Grand Prix in Baku, about what the FIA can do about this. Is there anything they can do to try and enforce a regulation change of some sort to either help Mercedes or something that might hinder them, if it's something as simple as raising the ride height in the car? I know Toto Wolff has gone out and said that it wouldn't make too much of a difference because it was shown that Mercedes were actually running a lot lower than almost everybody else. So it's something that people might have thought they could mitigate themselves rather than put their drivers through the pain barrier at the compromise of performance. So there's going to be a lot of fallout from this. I don't expect a short-term solution. So for now, hopefully we're going to go to a few more circuits where the track surface is a little bit more easier to drive on, rather than the bumps that we saw at Baku and Monaco, for example, a bit more like what we saw at Barcelona, which Mercedes seems to handle a lot better. So we'll have to wait and see. But right now, George Russell is doing a phenomenal job with Mercedes. And once that car does get up to speed and it's a lot more comfortable ride, I'm expecting big things from George Russell.
And it would be a good thing for Mercedes in general, since he is the future of their team, albeit they have plenty of drivers in their reserves and in the lower formulas. But George is the guy. And this year, through a quarter of the season, I think he has proven why Mercedes has invested so much in him to take over from Lewis Hamilton, who the 7-time world champion. It was reported about him not being able to get out of the car very well, seeing him as a fellow 37-year-old hobbling out of a car with back issues. It kind of reminds me of me, but the difference is he's way richer, has way more talent, has had way more women, and many other great things, 100 plus Formula One wins, et cetera, 7 world championships. But in this case, Lewis has been, I guess, being an R&D guy this year, trying to figure out different ways to make this car drivable, but it hasn't been as good for him, Carl. And obviously the results show not only on Saturday, but on Sunday. He was able to go and get a 4th place finish yesterday. He currently sits 6th in points. He's 21 points behind Carlos Sainz. So at the moment, for Lewis, it's going to a track where he's won 7 times, tied with Michael Schumacher for the most ever at Circuit Gilles Villeneuve in Montreal. Number 8 likely isn't going to happen without some sort of miracle. But for Lewis, it's more, I think, about kind of getting himself back in the mix with his teammate, let alone, competing to race up with the top 4 guys, because this is the biggest battle I think Lewis has had with a teammate since, everyone will talk about Nico, but that's neither here nor there. I think more towards his times with Jensen Button at McLaren, which was actually an equal battle. And it was balanced because McLaren didn't really give any favoritism. And in the end, it was a very good, strong battle, and Jensen actually beat Lewis. And so now George is doing it. What's the motivation going back to one of his favorite places, coming off of such a brutal race, Carl, to go out there, other than, being as great as he has been there, to go out and actually maximize performance?
It might be one of his favorite places, but it's a street track, let's be honest. And that is going to cause a nightmare for that Mercedes. And again, don't believe everything you hear about. In my mind, don't believe everything you read and see with that man. He is a compulsive liar in my mind. And the back thing is purely to get the ride height up, because they can't control their car. And the only way they can control the car is by raising everyone's ride height. So their car will go equally well, but on a smoother track. So I think it's all complete bull. I'm trying not to swear. Which is hard for me. But I don't know. I think that the Hamilton's not that bad. Let's be honest. He's a consistent 6th in reality, he's always apart from Imola, he's always been in the top 10. And if averaging out, he is 6th. He's exactly where he should be. And he'll probably end up, I mean, he did well last week, let's be honest. Had the Sainz and Leclerc stayed in, he would have been 6th, let's be honest. And the same with Russell, he would have been 5th. So let's not get too excited by that podium. Let's not get too excited. They are 5th and 6th. He was about, though, saying that Hamilton at Azerbaijan was about 30 seconds behind Russell, which was quite worrying and appalling. I don't know if that's strategy almost. Hamilton is going to have a tough year. He's just got to grin and bear it. That car is a crock of something, and he really has to grin and bear it this year. He's going to have to grin and bear Montreal. If he gets a 4th, he's lucky. But I'm expecting him to land in 6th, which is exactly where he should be at the moment. And that car needs to do one, basically. We said it from the very beginning, that car it's just an engineering step too far.
Yeah, they probably jumped the shark on that one. It reminds me of the McLaren in 09 when they had spent so much energy trying to win the world championship. And in turn, they did win the drivers' championship, not the constructors. But the next year, both themselves and Ferrari were on the back foot. This is where Mercedes is, and essentially where everybody else is, minus the top 2 teams in the championship. Well, we went over those first 3 teams, so let's go over the guy who was 7th in points, another British driver, and Lando Norris, McLaren's number 1, had a strong result at, or was out and did what he had to do at Baku yesterday. He finished 9th, so it wasn't as good as he probably wanted. Relative, but they didn't have the pace this weekend, Mikael, relative to other races this year. But Lando has been qualifying solidly, has been doing what he needs to do. And unlike his teammate, which we'll get into a little later, has been more consistent. And that's what McLaren needs at the moment in regards to their battle trying to possibly compete with, say, Mercedes. It's asking a lot. They're 100 points, nearly 100 points back. They're essentially in a pseudo battle with Alpine and Alfa Romeo. But, you know, for those, I know there's plenty of people who love McLaren on here. I'm a McLaren IndyCar guy. So the fact is, it's nice to see the likes of Lando Norris actually perform. But what do we see from him this weekend at Montreal for performance and possibilities of doing something of value?
I mean, you know, he's done well again in Baku, like you said. I mean, considering the fact that he had tonsillitis a couple of weeks back, and him saying in interviews as well that he's close to fully recovered, but not yet. So we can expect the trajectory to kind of keep going up. I don't know. I mean, Baku was a decent race from McLaren. I mean, they were able to keep both cars close to each other, you know, getting on the points. Ricciardo just edging out, I guess, on top of that driver battle. One thing I was looking at also is the fact that Lando only has one race in Canada, and in 2019 he also retired very early, so he doesn't actually have much experience, because I don't believe the smaller series go there, the junior series go there either. So that might be a tiny hindrance, I guess. It's very difficult to judge how well the car fits a track like Canada, I guess. So it's an interesting one. Also, I would say, because Ricciardo has had relatively good success there in previous years, both with Renault and Red Bull before that. So I would expect it to be quite an interesting showing, at least within the team, to see if this could be one of those weekends that Ricciardo actually takes an upper hand on Lando. But again, Lando is, you know, still recovering, so we'll see. I'm expecting a decent result from McLaren, but again, I was expecting also from Baku, and an 8th and a 9th is okay, but it's not fantastic for, as you said, a team that's technically fighting for 4th in the teams championship or constructors.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, right now their battle is kind of within themselves. Mercedes is in their own world, and so is McLaren. It's about consolidation and making the most of every weekend before they get to possible upgrades here at the British Grand Prix in a few weeks' time. But we'll see what happens with Lando. He doesn't have a lot of experience there, and it takes a little time to figure a circuit out, and so we'll see how that goes. And it's probably way rougher than it was a few years ago. Someone who does have a lot of experience at Montreal is Valtteri Bottas, and it wasn't one of the best results or performances out of the Alfa Romeo driver and team this week. This track definitely, or Baku, didn't seem to suit that car, and Valtteri Bottas struggled. But this is a track that seemingly does suit him in his history, and he's had some good results over time at him. What can he do this weekend? Can he get right back to where he has been at times this year, where back into the top 10 qualifying, kind of on the periphery of some decent points to kind of go and hold up his team as the lead driver there at Alfa Romeo?
Yeah, it was a very strange weekend in Baku for Bottas. It was by far the worst performance he put in compared to his teammate this season. And, you can couple that as well with saying that Zhou Guanyu was equally probably at his best so far this season since he's come into Formula One. I mean, Zhou Guanyu was easily faster than Bottas in qualifying. He was 6-7 tenths faster than his teammate all weekend. And in the race, Bottas was really struggling. I can't really put my finger on what was going on. He just didn't seem to be comfortable. And Baku's a circuit that Bottas is traditionally very good at. He was the first guy to win there. He'd led more laps at that circuit than any other driver. This was a circuit where you could argue to a degree, like we were expecting in Monaco, that Alfa Romeo could have really fancied a big haul of points. But Zhou Guanyu was the guy that was doing it until he had his reliability issues, which was more down to the Sauber side of it rather than the Ferrari power unit issue, which had plagued Magnussen and the two Ferraris as well. So we can at least forgive Ferrari of that one in regards to their retirement. But Bottas's performance was definitely below the standard he set this season, which has been a very high bar. You could argue probably more impressive than most of the seasons he's had at Mercedes when he was winning championships with Sir Lewis Hamilton. So this weekend coming in Canada, as you said already, a track that Bottas has a good history there. He's quite comfortable there. He's good there. I'm expecting Bottas to just shake this last race off, go again in Canada, and possibly find himself right up there in the points in the top 10 again. Hopefully that's the case. And again, it could depend on reliability. As I say, right now, these Ferrari power units, they're so unstable. We just don't know how they're going to perform. So on merit, I'd say, I think I'm expecting Bottas to get back to where he's been this season, back in the top 10, maybe a solid P7 or P8. But yeah.
And that would be good for them relative to where they have been in recent years. Of course, their performance this year has been much, much stronger. They've been in the doldrums and in the bottom of the table for a while. Their heydays of yesteryear have long since passed. One driver who seemed to have a lot of stuff going on with him yesterday was Esteban Ocon. A lot of overtaking because his Renault Alpine, whatever, was having people with DRS passing him at will. But he's been he's been strong. He's had decent points for most of the season. That's he's been 7th or 6th, 7th or 8th most of the year. That's his worst finish of a race where he actually got points, which is, of course, that's how it's going to be. It's 10th. But he's had some off days too, but he hasn't been as far off as his much more heralded teammate. I think Montreal's a track where it's kind of more Esteban Ocon's style, per se. I think you can be a little more aggressive, and it's less likely that you're going to pay the price since he's known to hit walls. So Carl, in regards to that, I know the Alpine, the Renault power unit isn't considered the best by any stretch of the imagination, but Ocon has kind of made the best of the situation and been able to maximize things while stuff has been going on with El Plan so far this year.
I mean, I think it's where he is in ninth is more luck than judgment, bearing in mind Alonso had 2 retirements. So, I don't overly trust that where his position is at the moment. Bearing in mind also 2019, he didn't have a seat. So he hasn't been there for a very long time. I think he was there 2018, if I remember correctly. So look, he's not going to, it's a track he hardly knows. He's not going to be anything special. I don't think he's going to end up where he is in this current table. I think he'll probably end up in 10th, 11th, maybe even 12th. I think that Renault engine isn't the worst thing I've seen, bearing in mind the Ferraris are on there at the moment, and bearing in mind the Mercs are on there. So look, I think that Renault engine isn't horrific. That car isn't actually that bad as a car. So where he's going to end up, I think he'll be low points or out of them. Very midfield, and not anything to really write home about.
Ocon in his history, he's only raced there twice, but he has had low points. So he has points finishes there, so it's not a bad circuit for him. So we will see what happens with that. The next driver we'll get into is a guy who had a very strong weekend at Azerbaijan, great qualifying, great energy coming through for Pierre Gasly, akin to what we've seen from him in recent years, Mikael, in that he would go and be the best of the rest. He'll go qualify 5th, 6th, and then he'll kind of compete and have opportunities to get that, get those good points. It's not been that way this year for the AlphaTauri team compared to, of course, their senior team. But yesterday's race and last weekend was more indicative of what Pierre Gasly has been known for over recent times. And can they carry that energy here and positive momentum? Positive momentum for him on his side of the garage, and with the performance there at AlphaTauri for Pierre Gasly.
I mean, he had a very, very commanding performance in Baku. I will say, I think it was his first point since Australia. I believe I read that. So, it's great to see him back. It's very entertaining when things are going well. So I would expect that this momentum was to continue. I'm not exactly certain where the performance increase suddenly came for AlphaTauri to have both cars, relatively well sitting in the points before, to notice unfortunate cracking of the rear wing. But in general, it looks like AlphaTauri is improving a lot in recent races. And yeah, I would expect at least the momentum for Pierre to continue. It looks like he's very happy. I guess, the recent news about Perez getting a longer contract at Red Bull is also really opening his mind to the fact that I have doubts that he never even thought it's going to be possible of returning to Red Bull anyway. So I think he's now really going to start pushing and looking for other teams, maybe getting it a little bit of an upgrade to a team like, McLaren or something that's a bit higher performance, or, to maybe fight for podiums in the future. So yeah, I believe in the momentum that's pushing AlphaTauri right now. Again, Canada is kind of a wild card for everyone because of no races, since the pandemic and everything. And with the new cars, it's tough to say, but I feel confident in Pierre in doing a Q3 performance on Saturday and then continuing on solid points for Sunday.
And weather always can play a factor there. Rain's always can sneak in there. The track surface could play a part in regards to tires and having to do strategy and multiple pit stops versus, one, depending on where the tire wear is for Pirelli. But the person he's tied with in points right now is Fernando Alonso. They're tied for 10th in the World Championship, Drivers' World Championship. It's a very close battle amongst a few drivers, really, from 10th to 15th. Fernando Alonso, a former winner of the Canadian Grand Prix way back when, 7 top 10s and 16 starts at Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, an average finish of 11.6. So not his best circuit by any stretch of the imagination, coming off of a race yesterday at Azerbaijan, which saw Fernando Alonso finish 7th, 4.5 seconds behind his fellow world champion, Sebastian Vettel, who we'll mention a little bit later. That's, solid enough. He's had some DNFs, as Carl said, this year. So when he does finish, at least he's making the most of the situation. Alpine now is overtaken Alfa Romeo for 5th in the Constructors Championship. So, I guess similar to what Esteban Ocon is doing, Adam, what can Fernando Alonso do to maximize their position in the Constructors World Championship as it stands before they go on a short break and go to both the British Grand Prix and French Grand Prix?
Well, ultimately, Alonso just needs a little bit more luck on a Sunday. I mean, yesterday in Baku, it was a much more Alonso performance that we were expecting. I mean, he's been driving relatively well. Ocon's been the driver picking up the points because he's been able to keep his nose clean quite literally and just, be consistent and get the results. Whereas Alonso's been the one more often than not that's shown the real pace this season in that Alpine car. I mean, he's had some reliability issues, obviously that hydraulics issue that hampered him in Melbourne, where he could have qualified on the front row in that race. That would have been a big haul of points for Alpine that weekend, but obviously we'll never know. Barcelona didn't have the best weekend because he got caught up in a few incidents. This weekend, in Baku, he was able to, drive a solid race. They took the gamble with that skinny rear wing. Granted, they weren't overtaken by anybody, but they didn't exactly make many overtakes themselves. They basically inherited positions from reliability issues from the two Ferraris. And of course, Yuki Tsunoda with half a rear wing. So it was another good performance, another solid drive from Alonso. Seems to be really in the mix at the moment and doing what he needs to get some points. He just needs to get more of those big results on the board, hopefully with a bit more fortune, and that will continue. So I'm kind of expecting more of the same this weekend for Alpine. I think that both of them are going to be solidly in the top 10. I think they're good, that they seem to be enjoying themselves in this car right now. It's going from strength to strength. So absolutely no reason why Alonso, as young as he is now, the driver with the longest career span in Formula One, overtaking Michael Schumacher last weekend. So there's absolutely no reason why he can't do it again this weekend in Montreal, a track, as you've already said, brings happy memories to him many years ago in the past. So yeah, another good performance I'm expecting from Alonso and Alpine.
And they're building up towards, of course, their home Grand Prix in a few weeks' time. They want to go and their home base, in a sense, in the next two, their home base and their home Grand Prix in the next two races. So it will trying to go and build positive momentum as we get towards the summer break for Alpine in their battle for 5th, maybe trying to go and make something happen and move up and battle McLaren for 4th in the Constructors, if possible. But we will see about that. In regards to the next driver in the standings, is Kevin Magnussen for Haas. The Haas team did not have their greatest performance this past weekend. It has been a very lean period for the American team here in recent Grand Prix, Carl. the initial momentum that they had with their car and the pace they had with Kevin Magnussen, especially, hauled them a few points, which was solid considering where they were last year with Egghead. But now the reality is setting in. Developments have been made, and some of these other teams are making moves forward, but the Haas team is starting to fall back. Essentially a pseudo home event for the team, not the absolute home event, but North American race. Plenty of Haas CNC machines used all over the world, but especially in North and South America. Kevin Magnussen, I think it's a circuit that suits him very well, but will the car and team help him out in that sense to give himself a chance, or will it just be kind of the continued pattern that we've seen in recent weeks?
Oh, Haas are just doing Haas things, gone back to the old style of Haas, and here we are. We're the highest they got is what, 16th in the last 4 races? Oh no, Mick got 14th, sorry. And Magnussen started strong. To be honest, can you imagine what Haas would be like if they had a ton of cash? Because they obviously start strong, and if they have the R&D and the development, they've got the ideas there. They just they slip off because they can't upgrade. They don't upgrade. They don't have that R&D that the other teams seem to have. But they obviously have a very clever amount of people at Haas that can work very early on and during the summer season. But as soon as they get out on that race on that track, they're sat there as a golden goose doing sweet tiddly po. So look, it'll be retirement. Max be 14th, 15th if they're very lucky. It doesn't. Here I got 17th last time on our last outing here, so I'm expecting the same. Haas being Haas.
It's too many pages open up. That's why I'm trying to go and unmute myself and go and pick up everything that's going on. That's great on my part. But yeah, I mean, Kevin Magnussen, unfortunately, the initial positivity that Haas had to start the season has started to wane. But, it could be worse. You could have Egghead driving your car. So that he's not there, or Putin's buddy there. So at least we don't have that. One person who actually seemed to show up this past weekend for the first time in a while is Daniel Ricciardo. Actually beat Lando Norris in the race, Mikael. And I think that probably is the first time this year, or only the second time, or no, first time this year he actually has beaten Lando Norris in the race. And so who knows? I don't know what Daniel had to drink, or if he had a good party, or if he hung out with the right people, or he was wearing a Dale Earnhardt t-shirt and he got all the vibes and momentum off of the Dale Earnhardt shirt. But a decent performance considering people are questioning his future at McLaren, at a track where he has won at before as well, in Montreal, coming up this coming weekend. 3 top 5s and 5 top 10s and 8 starts. So a track that he has done very well at in his history. But